Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. My name's Nick Park and I'm taking us through a set of teachings looking at the Old Testament, every book of the Old Testament, and seeing how Jesus is portrayed there. That Jesus is the centre of the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. We're in the first book of Kings, and there in 1 Kings we read about a prophet who many people would view as being the most dramatic and powerful prophet of all, and that's the prophet Elijah. You know, Malachi, the last book in the Old Testament, Malachi declared that Elijah would return before the day of the Lord would come, which is why in Matthew 16 and verse 14, some people actually speculated as whether Jesus was Elijah returned. Now, Jesus himself said that John the Baptist was not physically, he stressed John the Baptist was not Elijah physically returned to life again, but in a spiritual sense, in the manner of his ministry, that John the Baptist was like a rerun of the prophet Elijah. Now, probably one of the most dramatic incidents in the life and ministry of Elijah was whenever he confronted the false prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. And you had all these false prophets there who had been oppressing the nation with their human sacrifices and everything else. And Elijah turns up and challenges them to basically a bonfire competition. He says, let each of us build an altar and then let's see who answers by fire. And the false prophets thought this was a great idea because Baal, who they worshipped, was supposed to be the god of fire. So this was like on his home territory. So they built an altar, put a sacrifice on it and everything else, and began calling on Baal to send fire. But of course there was no response because Baal's a false god. And then they began jumping on and off the sacrifice. The reason they were doing this was because Baal was supposed to like human sacrifices, so they thought if they were on the sacrifice, he'd be more likely to send down fire. But they didn't really want to be the one that would actually get burnt, and so they jumped off again pretty quickly and let somebody else jump on, and like a game of musical chairs, hoping they weren't the one that was caught out at the end. But of course nothing worked, and Elijah actually mocked them and even got sarcastic with them. And then Elijah prayed and the fire came down from heaven and consumed his sacrifice. You know, where's Jesus in this? Well, Jesus is the fulfillment of every Old Testament sacrifice, whether it's offered in the temple or like Elijah's offered on top of a mountain. Because the fire of God represents God's wrath against sin. That was why they had sacrifices in the temple that were completely burned, a burnt offering, totally burned before the Lord, to symbolize how God's wrath burned against sin. And Jesus, when he was hung upon the cross for our sakes, he chose to be the sacrifice that would endure the wrath of God. And all God's wrath against sin was poured out upon Jesus. Now, I'm aware that this is not a popular idea. Some people like some of the Take Fives, some people don't. It's quite possible there will be people who will not like what I'm saying now, because the idea of talking about the wrath of God is not popular. We love to hear about the grace of God and the love of God. But God, the Bible says our God is a consuming fire, and God's wrath burns against sin. Sin is an absolute offense in the sight of God, and Jesus took that sin that deserved and merited the wrath of God, and Jesus took our sin upon his shoulders on the cross. So the fire would fall like heaven in a way much mightier than happened with Elijah on Mount Carmel. Now again, there people have criticized this. Some people say the cross, it was just a demonstration of God's love. But when you think about it, how does torturing somebody to death on a cross show love unless the death actually does something? If you reduce the cross of Jesus Christ simply to some display, it's not real. Jesus did something. He took the wrath of God upon himself that would otherwise have been directed at us for all eternity. One famous teacher called it cosmic child abuse. But Jesus did not go as a child to the cross. He was the Son of God, but he was also the second person of the Trinity, had existed with the Father from all eternity. He knew fine rightly what he was doing, and he took our place as the perfect sacrifice, that all the sacrifices of the temple and Elijah's sacrifice could only ever look forward to the perfect sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And for that, I give him thanks today. God bless you. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.